Hi everyone, this is Aaron for Zollotech, and we're going to compare the Surface 2 to the iPad Air. A while ago, or a year ago, I compared the Surface RT to the iPad 3rd and 4th generation, and these both have been significantly updated, and so it's time for another thorough comparison. This comparison is more of a guide to help you decide which device would be best for you, not necessarily which device I think is best. So let's talk about the price first and the options. Here we have the Surface 2, and it's pretty reasonable at $449 for the 32 gigabyte model or $549 for the 64 gigabyte model. It comes in this color. It's Vapor Mag aluminum color, or magnesium color rather, and that's pretty much your color options when it comes to the Surface 2. The iPad Air comes in silver and white, or black and space gray, which is this color here, and is a little bit more complicated, unlike Apple, for what you get as far as prices. We have a 16, 32, 64, or 128 gigabyte model, starting at $499 and going up an additional $100 for each variant of increase in memory. On top of that, we can also get LTE in this device, as opposed to the Surface 2, which doesn't offer cellular data or cellular LTE, where the iPad Air does, but you have to tack on an additional $129. So this is the 64 gigabyte model, which would be about $699, but since it's the LTE model, tack on an additional $129. So it's really about $829. Pretty expensive compared to the Surface 2. For that, we've got a really nice tablet, and here you can see the front of it. We have the display, obviously. We have a camera, a microphone. On the top of the Surface 2, we have the power sleep wake button. And this is actually a plastic strip where the antennas are for the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth that are inside of the Surface 2. On the back of the Surface 2, you can see we have a camera. We're going to talk about specs in a moment, but we have a camera, microphones, and we've got a kickstand here on the back that's dual positionable. So we've got one position like we did with the Surface RT. We've got an additional position on the Surface 2. Behind here, you'll find an additional spot to update or add additional storage rather, with a micro SD card up to 64 gigabytes of additional storage. On this side, we have our connector. This is like a MagSafe connector. It actually lights up when it's plugged in to let you know it's charging. Here we have a USB 3.0 port, mini HDMI out. It allows you to connect to up to 2 additional monitors. We have the right stereo speaker. On this side, we have the left stereo speaker. We have our 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, volume button, and then this is just an indent to let us open this back kickstand. Then on the bottom, we have the spot where we can connect additional accessories that we'll talk about later on. On the iPad Air, you can see again we have our display obviously up here, forward-facing camera, and a home button. This is also a home button, but it's not a physical home button. On the back, we have just aluminum here, a camera, we have a microphone, and this little black plastic strip is also for the antennas if you get cellular data. If you don't have cellular data, this will just be all aluminum. On the top here, we have an additional microphone, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, power sleep wake button, and this has got a skin on the back to help protect it, and so you might see some of that here. On this side, we have our anti-rotate switch or silent switch, depending on how you assign it, volume up and down, spot for our SIM card for different carriers. This is actually the T-Mobile model, but they're basically all the same antenna inside. Stereo speakers, but on the bottom, and lightning connector. Nothing on this side. So those are the outside of them. Like I said, this is made of magnesium. It feels very sturdy, very rigid. You can arc it a little bit if you really want to twist it. You can do the same with the iPad Air. And the iPad Air feels lighter, and it is a little bit lighter. This is about a pound, a little bit more now that it's got the LTE antenna. This is about 200 grams heavier than the iPad Air. As far as thickness goes, they're really not that big of a difference. You do have more of an angular industrial feel with the iPad or the Surface 2, but next to the iPad Air, it's not that much thicker. The iPad Air is actually 7.5 millimeters thin, and the Surface 2 is only 8.9 millimeters thin. So you can see right there they're both pretty comparable as far as thickness goes. It's not really that much thicker as far as the Surface 2 goes. To give you an exact on the weight, we actually have, depending on which model of iPad Air you have 469 grams or 478 grams, depending on whether you have Wi-Fi or cellular. The Surface 2 is 676 grams specifically. Now, as far as the actual displays of the devices, here you can see obviously it looks a little bit wider, and it is because it's in widescreen. It's a 10.6-inch display at 1920 by 1080 or 1080p rather, just like your television, but it has 208 pixels per inch, where the iPad Air is a 9.7-inch display measured diagonally with a 2048 by 1536 resolution and 264 pixels per inch. So a little bit more pixels on the iPad Air, which actually leads to a little bit crisper text, and we'll show you that when we turn those on a little bit later. Internally, we have some pretty impressive specs in both. The Surface 2 actually beats out the iPad Air in technical specs with an NVIDIA Tegra 4 32-bit quad-core processor with 1.7 gigahertz on each core. It also has 2 gigabytes of internal RAM and a 72-core GPU. The iPad Air has Apple's A7 proprietary chip, 64-bit architecture, dual-core, 1.4 gigahertz on each core, with quad-core graphics. And even though they both have impressive specs, the Surface 2 sounds a lot more impressive as far as specs go, but you really don't see too much of a performance difference when using either or. In addition to those specs, the iPad Air only has 1 gigabyte of RAM as well. Both have very large batteries, and they both claim up to 10 hours using browsing or Wi-Fi or video playback. I actually find to get a little bit more battery life out of the iPad Air than I do out of the Surface 2. The Surface 2 seems to use up battery a little more rapidly, and maybe that's because I use it for multitasking, and I'll show you that when we go through the operating system. But the Surface 2 in standby mode uses more battery as well. So I'll turn it on here. You can see right there's the battery. There's only about a quarter left, and it's really not been doing anything. It's just been sitting by for a day or two, and it drains, where this can sit by for many days, and it won't drain at all. And that may be Apple's software being a little more aggressive as far as that goes. Before we get into the operating system, let me just mention the cameras. The 3.5 megapixel camera on the front of the Surface 2 has actually been tweaked to be much better than the previous generation and allows for really good low light use. So if you're in a room that's not well lit, people will be able to see you just fine using Skype or whatever you're using. The iPad Air has a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera, where the back cameras on both of them are 5 megapixel cameras. They're both pretty good, but the iPad Air has a little bit better camera and video camera than the Surface 2. But the forward-facing cameras really are about the same, but the Surface 2 handles low light much, much better. Now, being that this is the Surface 2, which runs Windows RT, you actually have to rely on the App Store to use the different applications. Microsoft has created a specific version of Office on this tablet for you to use, which is really great, and we'll show you that in a moment, but you have to rely on the App Store. You can't use your traditional apps as you could on regular Windows 8.1. Now, that's not a problem in this comparison because the same is true for the iPad Air, where you have an App Store. Now, let's turn these on. And you can see the lock screens are a little bit different. You do get notifications on the iPad Air, but you have a constant notification on the Surface 2 that you can turn on different toggles. So you can see there's 5 email messages, Wi-Fi strength, and battery. Slide to unlock, slide up to unlock. This actually has a picture password that you create, and I did it wrong there. Let's do it again. And there you can see now we're in the home screen. Now on the Surface we have live tiles, and this may change in the future with Windows 8.2. There's some rumor that the desktop look will come back. I don't know if that's true on the RT versions of Windows, but that's just something to throw out there until we know for sure. So you can see we have live tiles. This is information that's updating live. Really, the only live tile on an iPad is the clock, which is actually updating in real time. Other than that, there's really no live tiles on an iPad. So that's a nice little addition that you might have with the Surface 2. The software on the Surface 2 is really fluid. They've come a long way since the original version, and you can see it's very responsive. In fact, they're about the same as far as that goes, and there's really no hiccup with either one. You can see that the iPad is more simple. The Surface 2 is a little bit more complex. And I find that to be true when I hand the Surface 2 or the Surface to someone and say, check this out. As you can see, there's not really a user interface here. There's tiles to tap on, but how do you do anything else? And that's really the problem I find that people have. On the iPad, you tap an icon to go into it. You hit the home button to go back. Now, we do have this control center or command center down here that you can do quick things. You see the brightness is all the way up. We also have notifications on the top. If we do the same on Surface, we can customize our tiles. Same if we pull down from the top. But on the right-hand side, we have the charms bar. And that will bring up the clock, tell us what time it is, but it will also bring in these search, share, start, devices, and settings icons. If we swipe from the left, we get the last app that was open. So these were the apps that were running last time. We can go to the desktop, and you can see Word is open. I can go back into the App Store. So completely different way of doing things. Now you can see that just hiccuped there for a second. And once in a while, the Surface will do that. However, since we have iOS 7 running on the iPad Air, it hiccups just as much, honestly. And hopefully those will both be addressed in future updates. And both are being updated fairly aggressively. As for the way the operating system works, it's really nice to have true multitasking on the Surface 2. On the iPad, if you're familiar with it, we can open Safari. Let's open Mail. We'll go back out. We'll open the App Store, go back out. And you have to go in and out. Where on the Surface, we can go into their App Store. And maybe we want to bring in Word. We slide in from the side and snap it in. And then we can resize that. So maybe we want to have music or a video playing on this side. We can slide that in and just resize as we see fit. So it's a really nice addition or thing we can do with it, which is really nice. Now let's talk about the App Store for a moment, because that seems to be a huge area where people are nervous about getting into the Windows RT version of things. And here you can see these are the top paid apps, top 1,000 apps. And the iPad has 1 million apps, including the iPhone apps at this particular time. However, the iPad or the Surface 2 has hundreds of thousands of apps, or at least 100,000 apps. So there's plenty of apps out there. They may not be the same thing, but there's plenty of apps. Let's go back and we'll wait a second here. Let's swipe in from the top, and let's take a look at the top free apps and kind of compare them, and I'll show you. Here we have some apps that are trying to be similar to the one that was pulled off of here. But here you can see, here's some top free apps. Facebook, Skype, Google Search, some Xbox games, which is nice. They tie to your Xbox profile on an Xbox. And here you can see we have a lot of different pretty familiar apps that are free and top apps. So you do have a lot of different apps that you can use. Hulu, Netflix, Jetpack Joyride. You can see there's lots of different things. On the iPad, people are pretty familiar with most of these apps. The only problem you may find is some Google services, but they'll seem to be fine if you can just log into Internet Explorer. So app compared to last year, there's really not that big of a difference, other than if you're looking for something specific like Instagram. You will have that on Windows Phone, but you don't have that on the RT version at this time. Let's go back to the home screen here. And one thing the iPad doesn't have yet is Office. So let's take a look at Office. We'll go into the desktop and take a look at this app. Now you can see, for whatever reason, the keyboard is not attached, but it's not popping up the keyboard. And you do find you run into these errors once in a while, but you can see how fast it is to go back into it and type. We'll hit the keyboard button down here and bring it up by itself. The keyboard is great. It works well, and we can do a split keyboard, and you can do that on an iPad as well. And you do have free apps on the iPad, such as Pages, that allow you to export in Word format. So there's really not a problem there, but you can multitask while you're using Word, like I showed you before. So it's really nice to be able to do that. Now on the iPad, to close an app, we double tap, slide it away. On the Surface 2, we just pull in from the top and close it. Now let me show you Mail also along with that. And we'll go into Mail. And Mail seems to be a little bit sluggish on the Surface 2, both in this version of Mail and Outlook. So for whatever reason, they're sluggish. And you can see we have a bunch of inboxes here, and you can combine them in all inboxes. The way the Surface handles this is we've got 3 different inboxes, and we can switch between them. So we can just go between the different inboxes, slide through, and you can see there's an example. It's not doing anything, and it was just slow. And that's what I find with Mail on here. That's really the only problem I have as far as apps go with the Surface 2. It just seems to hiccup from time to time over and over just in Mail. So hopefully that's addressed with software or with updates. Now, let's go back home, and let me just show you a quick speed comparison going to zollotech. So we'll go to zollotech in both. You can see it's not responding again. So there's something going on as well. There we go. So that happens once in a while, like I said, and hopefully that's worked out. So here's zollotech. Let's do the same here. And we'll hit go. They're both on the same Wi-Fi network, but should give you an idea. That was cached, I think. But we'll let it load on the Surface 2 and give you an idea how quickly it scrolls. No problems there. We'll pinch to zoom. Well, this is actually a mobile site, so it's not going to pinch to zoom on this. Where you can, on here, it's the full site. This is actually a newer version of the site that I've been working on. And so you can see it works great on both, but you get a little bit different experience. As far as the usability of both devices, both are comfortable to use. I find that I tend to use the iPad more, and that's really more because I use a MacBook and an iPhone most of the time, and they integrate well together. However, if I didn't have any of that stuff, the Surface 2 may be the better alternative, in that if I had a Windows phone or an Android phone, it may be a little better to use the Surface 2. It just depends on what your workflow is. If you're using Windows on your computer, you have Windows 8.1 on your full-blown computer, or you want to use this as a standalone, that may work out really well for you. Now, one of the things that both of these tablets have are a lot of accessories. Apple makes a couple simple accessories, as does Microsoft, and here we have the smart cover, just attaches magnetically. When we close it, it shuts the iPad off. When we open it, it turns it back on. It also functions as a stand, and they make a case as well. So that's pretty much all that Apple offers as far as that goes. Microsoft, on the other hand, offers this type keyboard too, and a touch keyboard too. This is actually the type keyboard. You can push down on it. A little bit expensive. This is also expensive for what it is, around $30, $40, and the other one's around $60. But this is about $130. For $120, you get the touch keyboard, and it's more of just a flat surface that you can type on. And they both work really well. But what they've done with this generation is they're backlit, and that's pretty incredible given how thin these are. It's really a backlit keyboard that works great, and it snaps into place. You can see there it is. And both of these are on full brightness. I don't know if I showed you that before, but this one I did, but not on the Surface here. And you can see this is attached, and I'll leave it flat for now, but if you want to use this on your lap, you just turn it into a kickstand, lean it down, and it really works great as a full-blown desktop. You use that USB port or Bluetooth to use an additional mouse, and it's like using a regular computer in that sense. If I lay it flat and we go back here, and we can just type like you'd expect, use it in Word or whatever you want to use it with. So it's a really nice keyboard. It also shuts the device off when you close it. When you open it, it turns it back on. And one of the things they've done that's really neat is when you're using it and you flip it around, it knows that it's flipped around. Well, it actually detached, but it knows that it's flipped around and turns off the keys. Even though you'd be holding them like this, it shuts them off and brings up the main keyboard. So if we plug it in, flip it around, it's deactivated the keys. If I lay it flat, I hit the Windows button. Takes a second for it to kick in. Oh, I actually don't have anything open. Hit the Windows button, it goes back. And you can see if I do that again, like this, hit the Windows button, nothing's happening. So it's really nice. They've integrated that well. And there's some other accessories they've made as far as a DJ pad and things like that that hopefully will be coming out in the future. Now, I do use a full-blown keyboard with the iPad via Bluetooth. I do have that, and it works well. So you can use either or for those. And there's plenty of accessories for both, and both have a really, really great backing as far as people that love their devices. Final thoughts really on both devices is that they're both great. Like I said before, it really depends on your use case. If you use mostly Apple products and you want a good consumption device that you can create on, but you need to carry around an additional keyboard or buy a special smaller keyboard case, you can do that. With the Surface 2, if you have a Microsoft workflow and you want to get some work done using Word instead of Pages and maybe multitask, watch a YouTube video at the same time, you can do that on a Surface 2 where you can't do that on an iPad. It's more of a singularly focused device, and some people love that workflow. Some people prefer this workflow. It really depends on what you need it for, but both are great. They both have great music players. They both have subscription type. Well, the iPad has a ton of subscription apps where Microsoft has built that in as far as music goes, and you can get music and videos, and it's really great on both devices. So I'd really, really be interested to hear what you think about each device. Which one would you prefer and why? Let us know in the comments below. And as far as each device, would you prefer the Pro version of the Surface 2, or maybe you prefer a MacBook over that? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that as well. If you have any additional questions or things you think I might have missed or failed to point out, please place those in the comments and let the other viewers know what you think as well. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Zollotech. Be sure to subscribe and like this video, and check out some of the other videos we have as well.